Thank you very much. I think this is a very important time for us to have some context to what we're discussing here this morning. On the issue of the SDGs and our region, I wish to draw our attention to some important piece of statistics. The infrastructure gap in lack to achieve the SDGs by 2030. In the area of water and sanitation, which is SDG 6, there's a financing gap of almost $375 billion. In SDG 7, affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy, there's a financing gap of almost $580 billion. In SDG 9, resilient infrastructure and innovation, there's a financing gap of more than $1 trillion. In SDG 11, inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities, there's a financing gap of more than $220 billion. How do we mobilize resources to bridge this gap if we are to achieve the SDGs by 2030? This is a key question that we must all address. It also highlights the opportunities that exist for private capital and development resources in this region. When we look at the issue of food crisis, the food crisis, 250 million people are facing acute hunger. In this region, in LAC region, between 2019 and 2021, the prevalence of hunger increased by 28%. 40% of our people, of our population, are now food insecure. How are we going to address this? Well, with El Nino on our heels, this is going to get worse. On the issue of digitization, AI, and robotics, I have a simple question to ask. Is this going to be another area in which we'll spur the inequality that exists in our world? We already have an issue with financing in the developing world for important issues like achieving the SDGs. Many are steaming ahead on AI and digitization. We have an opportunity now to fix it from the inception. How do we ensure we build out digitization in a world in which we will not expand the disparity and inequality among people and between nations? How is it we get it right from day one? We should discuss that. What is the formula to achieve it and getting it right from day one? On the issue of climate financing, we have heard a lot. I endorse fully the Bridgetown Initiative. But I want us to all agree today that enhanced advocacy and representation of SIDS, to have a stronger voice and representation in financial institutions, is of optimum importance. Are we willing to say that we want these reforms today? In revisiting the voting rights, the quota allocation, and the broad representation and interests of SIDS, these are the essential reforms in the governance framework in international institutions that are necessary. Here in the EU and CELAC, where is our joint energy strategy? What is the role of natural gas in the transition? Are we willing to have a frank, balanced approach on the discussion on oil and gas? Are we willing to invite all the stakeholders around the table? We cannot say that we want to find a common solution and lock out the producers of hydrocarbon from the discussion. This is not in our interests. Let me remind us all today that Asia will spur the demand for oil and gas. The region is growing and will outgrow US and Europe by the end of this year. The South Asian population alone is 50% greater than EU. How are we going to have this balanced discussion on the energy mix that is required for the future? And if you're going to say an end to hydrocarbon, who will produce what the world needs? Who determines who the producer will be and shall be? So there's great clarity that is required on this. We are providing great leadership on the environment. I have two questions. 20% of the world's oxygen is created by the Amazon jungle. Asia is Latin America's second largest buying and selling partner after the US. Where is the EU in this equation? When is the EU going to come on board in terms of being a purchaser of carbon credit and contributing to this market? These are the real questions before us. I cannot end by saying, Cuba, all of us around this table, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit us, we saw nurses from Cuba in distant countries being welcomed with open arms. When we in the region are in need, the first phone call to Cuba to train thousands of doctors, nurses, medical workers, they provide it. In exchange, are we willing to say to the world that Cuba deserves a place, that Cuba has done what is right for humanity? These are the real questions. Let us be bold. Let us be bold in taking the right decision and leading by example. Thank you.